Hi, everyone. I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. I'm excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in healthcare IT. And our guest today is Alissa Hsu Lynch. She's global lead of MedTech Strategy and Solutions at Google Cloud. Welcome, Alissa.
Thank you so much for having me, John. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so excited to talk about, some of the work you've done. You have such an interesting experience in healthcare. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about yourself and Google Cloud.
Sure. So I actually have a pretty diverse background. Never would have thought I'd end up in this role working at Google Cloud now, because I started my first job out of college as a professional modern dancer.
Wow.
So I've gone from being a dancer to now working in health IT. But I became a dancer because I had danced ballet my whole life, all the way up until college. I'm a little bit short, so I didn't make it into a ballet company, a professional ballet company before college, but ended up going to Princeton University, getting an English degree. And my senior year, one of my college dance professors actually asked, have you thought about dancing professionally? And I said, I have, but I'm actually planning to go to law school. And she convinced me to go into New York City and audition for some dance companies. I actually got into a dance company for a year-long tour. So I said, well, I think I'll just defer from law school. I can always go back to law school. And in the end, I never went back to law school. I ended up dancing 6 years professionally, traveling all over the world, and that was my childhood dream. So I feel really fortunate to be able to live my childhood dream.
Amazing.
But didn't want to continue dancing forever. And honestly, you can't, like many professional athletes. So I went back and got my MBA at Columbia, and I got a job with Johnson & Johnson right out of business school. So I ended up having about a 20-year career with Johnson & Johnson, starting in their consumer products businesses, worked across different functions, marketing, sales, general management, strategy. Also had the opportunity to live around the world. So
That's cool.
I did 2 international assignments, one in Shanghai, China, and then another pretty recently, moved back about a year ago from Switzerland. So I was working in the Europe, Middle East, Africa region, and moved from their consumer business over into healthcare and medical devices. So I worked on diabetes, orthopedics, and across the J&J medical device businesses. So, 20-year career with J&J, and then was living in Switzerland. And my husband and I were empty nesters. We have 2 boys.
Okay.
Who are now young adults. And my husband and I decided that we love the mountains in Switzerland, that we wanted to find somewhere like that in the US, and we landed in Seattle. So I'm now living in Seattle, and I'm close to the mountains, which has been great during COVID.
Absolutely.
But with that, I also decided to leave J&J. And at the end of last summer, got this job with Google Cloud, which has just been a fun ride, all during COVID. So I've not met any of my colleagues, but really moved me into the health technology space, which is what I was very interested in doing. And now I lead our MedTech strategy for Google Cloud. So essentially leveraging my healthcare industry expertise to identify what are the problems we can help medical device and diagnostic companies solve using Google's technologies, data analytics, artificial intelligence to solve those problems. And often the problems that they're facing are to help deliver more value to their customers, so the providers and the patients that they serve. So that's a little bit about me.
Man, what a story. And I love the little anecdotal, and I haven't met my colleagues. What a world we live in. But I mean, I think that's the beauty of cloud, though, right? Is that it transforms it, that you don't have to meet them, and you've been able to do this job. So I think that's what's interesting. But what do you think is maybe the most transformative thing that you're working on and the impact that it will have on healthcare?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to move into health tech is because I think technology really has just a huge power to transform healthcare through big data and AI. And so one of the exciting things that I'm working on is how do you apply artificial intelligence to help improve clinical workflows or help doctors and clinicians do their jobs better. So one example is around AI and medical imaging. So Google has a lot of expertise in computer vision. So if you think about Google Photos or just from other parts of the company, Google has a lot of expertise in computer vision. So now we're looking at how do you apply AI to help enable faster diagnoses of medical imaging. So actually, I think 80% of diagnoses are related to imaging in medicine. And it's largely a human-led task. So, clinicians, radiologists, doctors are, manually interpreting what does this image mean? What is the diagnosis? And computer vision can actually see things that the human eye can't see. It can, AI can compare one image to a huge data set of labeled images. And so that's one thing that's, I think, really is an example of what can transform healthcare. And so, Google Health, which is part of the Alphabet universe, has developed an algorithm for diabetic retinopathy, one of the leading causes of blindness. It's been CE mark approved. And that algorithm is actually now being used in areas where there are shortages of doctors. So initially it's being used in rural India and clinics in Thailand to enable people, out in communities to screen for diabetic retinopathy, reaching patients much earlier. So hopefully we can help prevent blindness by screening patients and more patients more broadly. So I think that's an example of how AI can help address gaps in healthcare, but also just help clinicians do their jobs better.
Yeah. And I think that's a great place to work, both diabetic retinopathy, which we've written quite a bit about. I mean, how important that screening can be because you can stop it from causing blindness. A powerful area to work, but also to do it in places where the alternative is nothing. That's a powerful message as well. But I think it's interesting that you point out AI and that there was a fascinating slide I saw from the HIMSS conference last week that said if it's written in Python, it's machine learning. If it's written in PowerPoint, it's AI, which, because there's so much hype around AI that I think many of us are saying, well, where is it real and where is it overstated? I mean, what's kind of your take on, AI and big data and, how real is it and how quickly is it going to impact healthcare?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think AI has the potential to be really transformative for healthcare, but I would say where the healthcare industry is today, we still have a lot to do to get there to realize that potential. So, Google Cloud in particular is focused a lot on just the data itself, because first of all, you need the data to build the machine learning models. You need good data, and data still sits in silos across the healthcare ecosystem. So that's a huge problem that we're trying to help address by just enabling interoperability of the data, bringing it into FHIR standards so that the data can talk to each other. And then I would also say across the healthcare ecosystem that data sitting in silos, sometimes it's locked in different systems. So it may be locked in an EHR system, or maybe a company that has access to the data sees that as a competitive advantage for themselves. So they may not want to share that data more broadly. So I think there's huge potential in big data if we can actually help free up that data so that more people have access to it. But there's privacy, access, protection, compliance, all of that stuff, those nuts and bolts. I think we still have to work through all of that and put that foundational work in place. And then I think the AI and building machine learning models can really take off. But I think there's a lot of great examples of where AI is being applied for good and to help companies and to drive more efficiency, manufacturing and supply chain. But there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of moving the whole industry forward to a state where everybody can benefit from it.
Yeah, that's fair. So you talked about your previous work at J&J. I think we can all say J&J now thanks to the vaccination, Johnson and Johnson. But what do you think has been the biggest change to the industry that you've seen, since working there and of course now working at Google?
Yeah, so I left J&J last summer, so about a year ago, and clearly the pandemic happened. So that certainly accelerated so many different trends in healthcare that I think everybody's aware of, but, telehealth and remote patient monitoring, even in hospitals, we've heard that, there's just been huge adoption of using patient monitoring and then also wanting to track patients more at home. But I also think there's just been a willingness to collaborate in a way that we had not seen in many, many years. So in the development of the vaccine, people sharing the science and working together, and then accelerated approval. So, kind of recognizing for the benefit of everyone, we need to look at more innovative ways to accelerate approvals and get vaccines to people. So I think that those are some things accelerated by the pandemic. But another thing I wanted to mention is just this idea of health equity, and with Black Lives Matter and social justice, I think that has forced companies to really confront and start thinking about how are we going to address health inequities for people in underserved communities, and how are maybe our products or our approach to the marketplace contributing to that, or what are ways that we can actually start to proactively address that. So I think that's been, kind of two really sort of devastating events that have happened over the past year, that happened to be since I left J&J, that I think have resulted in much more positive momentum that will benefit the healthcare industry and patients in general. So those are two things I wanted to mention.
Yeah, great examples. And I think there is such a different awareness of the problem. I think there's still work to do as far as the health inequity, but at least there's a lot more awareness. The collaboration piece is interesting too. I wonder, will it continue, right? We obviously had a shared common enemy, COVID, right? Which whenever there's a shared common enemy, that's easier. So will it continue because now we have relationships with people that we didn't work with previously? Or, I don't know. How do you see that playing out, going forward?
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that a lot, and it relates to the earlier question that we talked about regarding just data sitting in silos and all of that. So I hope that it will continue, because I think the potential of AI and really understanding how we can benefit patients, understanding what's driving variability in care, what the different role of medicines or devices or care centers play. I think actually the potential of unlocking that big data requires collaboration.
Yeah.
Because the data sits in silos across the whole ecosystem. And until we can free up that data and more openly share that data to benefit patients and science, I think we won't really realize the true value of population health and getting to precision medicine and seeing the full longitudinal view of the patient. But as I mentioned before, there's a lot of challenges and things we have to address to enable that, to do that very securely, compliantly, and in a way that benefits all the stakeholders. Yeah.
Well, you make a great point. I've often commented about a research study by Google, interestingly enough, by Google researchers, that, is it better to have better algorithms or is it better to have more data? And which one, can the algorithms make up for lack of data, basically? And the research, this is my Cliff Notes version, is that more data was actually better and created better outcomes than the algorithm, basically the algorithm can't make up for the lack of data. data. And so, your comments are really interesting and in line with your colleagues there at Google. So that's great.
Good, good. Yeah, I think definitely the algorithm is only as good as the data that it's built on. So the more data you have, the more robust the algorithm, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we wrap up, I want to kind of call back to your first job that you talked about, being a professional dancer. I have a passion for dancing. A lot of people know that in my community as well. So I'm really
Love that. I
interested
love
in
that.
this. Yeah. So, is there a lesson maybe from dance that you could apply to healthcare or to the healthcare business? Something you learned from your dance career that maybe we could take away with us?
Yeah, it's been interesting because I think early in my career, my business career, following my dance career, I sort of downplayed the fact that I had been a dancer. Like, I love that you just embraced that you love dance.
Yeah.
Um, and it took me a while to realize that actually dance was still a part of who I was. I think I felt like, oh, people won't respect me if they knew that I was a dancer now
Uh-huh.
that I'm in the business world. But
Uh,
then I realized, authentic leadership and just that I actually had learned a ton from dance that benefited me in business and I think, now in my healthcare career, such as just discipline,
yeah, 100%.
creativity, being able to approach problems with a creative mindset. We would improvise while we danced in order to create the final choreography. I think performing under pressure has certainly helped me, being on stage in front of hundreds of people. Definitely prepare, a good
Yeah.
rehearsal makes a great performance and all the preparation. But I think I'll probably come back to that just idea of collaboration.
Mm.
And I think that that concept can benefit healthcare significantly. And I think the example of the community coming together for the common goal, that is so common in dance. So in a dance company, you are working towards the same objective and creating a mosaic from all the different dancers who are all different body types, different styles, different strengths, but you need to come together as one to create that final masterpiece. And I try to take that philosophy in leadership, in leading teams, bringing out the best of different people, but aligning them on a common goal. And I think that example during COVID of just how the industry came together to do that, I'd love to see that continue for sure.
No, I love it. That's a really great example. I'll throw one out there for you. I was watching the taping of So You Think You Could Dance, and Twitch and Comfort Fudoku were doing a training, and we were literally in the lobby because they were running behind schedule, all these things, and they were training the 100 of the dancers, right? 100 of amazing dancers that have trained their whole life dancing. And watching these trained dancers pick up the choreography to a dance they've never done before, I'm sure you can relate to this. It was astounding how quickly they picked it up and how quickly they knew what they were being taught. I think there's a lesson there for us in healthcare. I think we sometimes are like, we got to invent the wheel ourselves, but no, if someone's good at data, let's bring them on. We don't have to train them, or they'll pick it up much quicker. They're good at UI, right? I mean, you have at Google so many people that are good at UI, that are good at cloud, that are good at security. I think maybe we need to rely more on the experts because they pick it up a lot quicker than trying to reinvent the wheel, which we like to do in healthcare a lot. So anyway, there's my lesson.
Yeah, no, I really like that and completely agree because I think it's really for us to succeed and improve healthcare moving forward. I think it has to take this ecosystem approach where people bring their best to the table and then we work together on that. So I love that
Awesome.
example.
Well, Lisa, this was a lot of fun, and thanks for sharing your insights and perspectives. And thanks everyone for watching. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com. Thanks, Alissa.
Thank you so much.